All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ANH 2025. My name is Shaylin Cullen, and I am the technical manager for this session entitled Teaching Food Economics for Agriculture, Nutrition, and Health, chaired by Amelia Finneret and William Masters. Thank you for taking part in ANH 2025, and we look forward to a robust and interactive session today. Thank you so much. Over to you, Amelia.
Thanks so much, Shaylin, and thanks everyone for being here this morning. It's great to see all of you. Welcome. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my slides here. And I'll kind of tell you a little bit about how the session is going to go. But first, just to introduce myself, I'm Amelia Finneret. I teach economics and global health at Allegheny College, which is a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania. Will, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Sure. Yeah, it's very nice to see everybody joining. Thanks so much. This is the first wave of the Learning Labs. We have two right now and then two later on today, and a great week ahead. So thanks everybody for joining. It's just been a real joy to work with Amelia and with the whole ANH team on what we'll share today.
Yeah, thanks so much. We're excited. Okay, so our plan for today, we're going to do an introduction. We want to know sort of where you guys are coming from, what you're doing, and what interests you about teaching food economics. So we'll start there. And then I'm going to give just a short overview of what Will and I think about teaching food economics and how economic thinking is really useful for thinking about the food system and solving food system challenges. Then we want to do a Q&A with you guys. So definitely think of your questions if you want to ask them verbally, or of course, if you prefer the chat, you can do that as well. But we want to have a group discussion here. We're going to do some polling of you guys to see sort of where your minds are at in terms of your teaching and your research related to food economics. Then Will is going to go over the textbook. So this is a book that Will and I published last year. It's open access. The open access was funded by the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Health Academy. And so we're going to review the book and its contents and for you guys to get a sense of. And then we're going to have a course development workshop. So there's going to be two breakout rooms. You can start thinking about which one you want to join. It's going to be up to you. Even if you're not looking to develop a new course, develop a new module in a course, make a new lesson plan. I think either one of the breakout rooms could be useful to you if you're really ever thinking about teaching. We're going to talk about some kind of key teaching issues, but of course with a focus on food economics, and you'll have a chance to kind of work on your own projects in that session with a little bit of help from me and Will. And then we'll end with a just group discussion about sort of where we see this field going. So that's what we're going to be doing. What's our definition of economics here? Well, this is not ours. This is Alfred Marshall's. So he wrote the first real economics textbook, Principles of Economics. And what he wrote was that it is a study of mankind and the ordinary business of life. It examines that part of individual and social action which is the most closely connected with the attainment and with the use of the material requisites of well-being, one of which, of course, is food, right? You need food to have well-being. And so what he's saying here is that we're looking at how individual choices and how those individual choices kind of interact with each other in a way that allows us to produce well-being. And human health is one of those things that's in there. So, a few things about this definition. He is saying that it's a study of this, right? Not the only one. I know we have a sociologist in here. Sociology has some, similar intersections with examining sort of how people's choices affect their well-being. The ordinary business of life, right? What that means is we're talking about everyday decisions here. And one of the most frequent everyday decisions that we all make multiple times a day is about food. I was reading an article the other day that found that people make about 200 decisions about food every day. They were trying to break it up into all the little pieces that you do, including not just what you're eating, but how long you're eating for and who you're eating with and how you're preparing it. So when they did it like that, there were 200 choices involved, which is a lot. So what economics allows us to do is analyze explain and predict individual and social choices about food. So this could be anything from someone choosing what to eat for dinner to how everyone's choices then add up and give us prices to what governments decide in terms of policy. All of those things are economics. And economics actually started with food, with agriculture and food policy. So I am sure a lot of you have heard of Adam Smith. And Adam Smith was really frustrated with some unfair laws that protected British landowners. They were the Corn Laws. They were a high tariff on food imports. And that really was one of the reasons why he wrote his book, The Wealth of Nations. So it really started with agriculture and food policy in his, in his mind. And he's, of course, an economist, the first economist, but also a philosopher. And this is really sort of what inspired him to work on these issues. And we also see economics and food economics in particular coming up in some very early works, including an essay on the principle of population by Thomas Malthus, which arose out of a big concern between the challenge of population growth, but also food supply and what that meant for the world. We then later on, during a time of very serious food shortage problems in the 1970s, we had this book, which is Food Policy Analysis by Timmer, Falcon, and Pearson. And this was really the first economics book to use more accessible diagrams versus kind of the higher level calculus and mathematical thinking, so that people who were just doing food policy, who weren't necessarily trained in that kind of mathematics, could actually do economics and therefore make good food policy. So this book was really key, and you can find it online still in a PDF, and you can also get the old editions in a hard copy. It's a great book, and this definitely was an important kind of signal that, okay, people need economic thinking to study the food system, even if they're not economists, and that matters. So even more recently, Chris Barrett, who is a colleague in our field, he teaches at Cornell University, he said in an interview, agricultural economics will remain important so long as humans continue to want to eat. It's that simple. And I can tell you that I definitely heard people saying like, okay, well, why are you studying agricultural economics? Like, we already know everything we need to know about that. When I was in graduate school. And it's definitely not the case. There's always new things to discover, just like any field of economics, there's a lot. And so that's something that Will and I think definitely agree on. Okay, so when we're thinking about modern food economics or modern agricultural economics, what is really going on with it? Well, there's a great article by Jeffrey Dorfman. One of the things that they talk about in this article is that agricultural economics really has a mission to solve problems, current and future problems. It also has a lot of opportunity for interdisciplinary collaboration. You can see in this session, for example, there's a lot of folks from nutrition, from public health. We've got physicians in here, we've got sociologists, we've got economists in here too, but people from all over, different academic fields are interested in this. And that's because this interdisciplinary collaboration is key for solving food system problems. The field of ag econ has added several different areas like environmental economics, health economics, and it's all about that applied work that tries to solve problems in those areas. And it's future oriented, and it's I think it has a lot to offer. So students who don't know about this kind of field of economics, they might not know that economics does this at all. And so they might think that economics is all about, okay, well, how do businesses maximize their profits, right? That's economics. Or what is the stock market going to do? That's economics. But of course, neither of those things are economics. And really what it is a lot bigger than that. And so I hope that we can kind of convince everyone of that today. In terms of food, why food economics? Well, one reason is what I said earlier, which is that people make choices about food really frequently. So it makes it a great thing to analyze, because with economics, what you want to do is you want to analyze observable choices. That's really what economics is good at. That's a kind of in contrast, if you wanted to think about it in contrast to something, to psychology, where you're trying to think about what's going on inside someone's mind, which is really hard for an economist, but they've definitely collaborated with the psychologists on that and found out a lot of really important things too. But food, we decide things about food multiple times a day, possibly up to 200 times a day. And it's a universal human experience. Everyone needs to eat, or everyone needs to be fed in some way. And people have different likes and dislikes. They also face different constraints. They also have different barriers. Food as a topic just really bridges those disciplinary divides all across academia, like we can see just in the audience today, from where folks are coming from. And food just matters to everyone, right? Even if you're not like a foodie, food still matters to you because you need it to live. So when we have the shared interests like this, shared interest in food can create space where we can all connect about this. Really, the only other thing I can think of that has a similar effect is sports, right? Like sports does this too, but food definitely does as well. I don't know if there's anything besides food in sports. Okay, so in terms of our students, a lot of us are teachers, or we do want to be teachers one day. Our students definitely care about the food system. They come from a lot of different disciplinary backgrounds, and they care about a lot of really important things, such as climate change, such as inequality, such as starvation and malnutrition. And we want students everywhere to have the opportunity to use economic thinking to inform their work. And that's really the goal. So we can explore these intersections. There's a lot of reasons why it works really well. For one thing, there's a lot of available data from hundreds of years ago through till today about food production, about people's nutritional status. People make these choices really frequently about food and eating, and we can observe what they do to try to figure out what their preferences are. Of course, preferences matter a lot when you're coming from a clinical or a nutrition perspective. You want to know, like, what do people actually like? Because I can tell you, if they don't like it, they're not going to eat it, or it's going to be hard for them to do that. We want to use economics as well to be able to explain and predict outcomes, to be able to make good policy. So a lot of you might become policymakers, and what you're going to want to do is know what's going to happen when a policy, or have a good sense of what's going to happen when a policy is implemented. And also, of course, what possible unintentional consequences that policy might have. Food, like we talked about, touches everything, and people all over the world have livelihoods in growing food, which I think a lot of you are coming from the agricultural side of things. And most poor people in the world are farmers. Their lives rely on food to eat it, of course, but then also their livelihoods for producing it. And that is a very tenuous situation sometimes. And so I think a lot of folks in the ANH Academy and members are kind of interested in that space, because it's so important, and it's important for so many people around the world. So the last thing really that I want to talk about is that food economics training, and I think it shows from the audience here, food economics training can help people in any of these areas, right? Because food matters for all of these areas of study. And what we need to do is figure out, well, what do people like? What are people going to choose? What are governments going to do? And how is that going to affect people? All those questions are economics questions. And those questions definitely happen in all of these different areas. Okay, so we're going to do a Zoom poll. And this one is going to be a little bit more about thinking about your needs for teaching. And so Shaylin is going to share the Zoom poll, and then you can respond, and then she'll be able to show us the responses and we can take a look at them. So just, Shaylin, while you're getting that started, I'll read you guys the first question. If you do teach food economics now, what do you like about it? Or what do you like about teaching agriculture, teaching nutrition, teaching public health, in a way that intersects with economic issues. What are you excited about in this space? But yeah, it looks like you guys have a really wide range of interests when it comes to teaching. And the practicality seems like an important aspect. New solutions, real skills. Yeah, the skill building aspect of applied economics, I think, is really important. Um, you know, as Will is going to talk about, we would want our students to be able to like kind of read an article and then be able to draw an economic diagram of what's happening and just like a sketch just to see like, okay, well, what's going on here? And then kind of talk about it with someone who's interested. So the skill building is really key. Okay, that's terrific. The next question is about what is limiting or constraining you and how you want to be able to teach food economics or teach the topic that you're teaching. What are the constraints? What are the problems? What are the limitations? What's facing you there? And it might be anything. I know teaching is hard sometimes, and some of us might teach online. That is hard sometimes. So yeah, I'm really curious to see folks' responses here as well. So let's see some keywords in the word cloud: microeconomics, knowledge, limited knowledge, adequate understanding, like they don't have a curriculum maybe, assumptions, microeconomics. Okay, great. Time to research and prepare slides. I get that. Over reliance on unrealistic assumptions. Yeah. Okay, great. This is great, everybody. Yeah, the scope is big. It's a big scope. It's a little the book that we're going to talk about definitely ended up longer than Will and I planned. Maybe he can talk about that too. But that's great, everybody. Thank you so much. Okay, next question. Yeah, definitely feel free to raise your hand or unmute. So the next question, thinking about what our students need, right? And there's definitely like some student related challenges that seem to be a little bit new to me. How can we do things differently when it comes to teaching economics or to teaching agriculture, teaching nutrition? You know, our students need more attention, they need more materials, they need more accessible materials. They are distracted by a lot of very exciting things, right, on their phones and otherwise. And they also face just a lot of real challenges, right? You know, such as having to work while they go to school, taking care of their kids while they go to school, you know, things like that. Students everywhere are facing just really a lot of challenges. So I'm curious about what could help our students, right? What do you think could help our students to learn better, especially in this topic? So, so that's the next question. Short and practical oriented classes. Oh, that's great. Make the material easier to understand and relatable. Excellent. Openness about discipline limitations. That's a terrific one. We talk about that a little bit in the book, and it is really important. Problem-based learning, practical work, interdisciplinary collaboration, simplified resources. That's all great. Yeah. Real life examples. Excellent. We love real life examples. Project-based learning. Yeah, it does take time to learn economics. Economics is really abstract of a way of thinking. And so it kind of takes a while for your brain to click into it. Yeah, we hope that the book does a good job at helping with that. Adequately prepared with materials, videos, demonstration gardens. Yeah, definitely. That would be great for project-based learning. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for doing those. I think when we're doing the breakout rooms, you know, like I said before, even if you don't teach right now or you haven't taught, I think either one would be really helpful if you're thinking about teaching in the future, to learn about course descriptions, learning objectives, course design, and also to see, what kinds of design elements might help address some of these challenges for students, and what kinds of materials might make it easier for you to incorporate food economics into your teaching. So thanks so much for that. Okay, so the next part of our session here, Will is going to talk about our textbook.
As Amelia said at the outset, this has been made open access, available for free, because the Gates Foundation, during this period of time, was willing to pay, it turned out cost $20,000 to allow the book that we had written over the past 4 years to be free to you. And that's because the ANH Academy is funded in part by the Gates Foundation, and they had that commitment to open access. So it was not additional cost to the Academy, but rather additional funds from Gates for the open access fees that give us this, I think, extraordinary opportunity to just put it on your phone. Like literally, you just have it on your phone. A student can have it on their phone, on a tablet, read it whenever they um, like. And it's also very helpful to have the book structure be something you can skip around in. So I believe students and yourselves can just skip around in the book and find nuggets, find bits, find pieces that are of interest to you and are relevant to what you're teaching. So it's been just a huge joy to work on this with Amelia. As I mentioned, it was 4 years in the making. And partly because of the pandemic, partly because of just how intricate a problem this was. So I'll share what we're trying to do here. Amelia, the next slide will give us a sense of the purpose. So on the left, on the bottom icon, you see that supply-demand diagram. We're trying to use that kind of economic model, this kind of theory, this kind of mechanism that we think is behind the phenomena we observe, just like biochemistry is behind things we can see. These economic models are one way of explaining the things we see, and extraordinarily accurate, actually, it turns out, in predicting certain kinds of outcomes. Not all kinds, but certain outcomes, just like biochemistry can predict certain things in life, economics can predict certain things in life. We also want to do that second icon, the looking glass, the magnifying glass, looking at something going up and down, to find the data. So a looking glass to look for, know what to look for, and then how to use those data and how to explain them to people, how to talk about them, how to write about them, to explain what's going on in food and agriculture and nutrition. Then this image of a bridge, the image of a bridge that allows people to talk to each other in a common language where they have a shared understanding from the data and from the model, the theory, so that they can speak and engage, we can speak and engage with each other. And finally, the idea that these are career tools. These are skills that will help you as a faculty member, as a teacher and instructor, and as a researcher, and will help your students in whatever kind of work they want to do. So the next slide will give us the first type of exercise that Amelia and I do in our classes that I think you would like to perhaps use in your classes, which is to do analysis of the news, of current events that people have been reading about, hearing about, seeing on their phones, and think about it in an economics manner by drawing the correct diagram that fits the story. And then we'll show you kind of examples of that. But for example, if you're teaching in the week where there's some news about the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA in the United States, restricting imports of seafood and melons, cantaloupe, and canned foods, well, how would that affect outcomes? And I can tell you that I was teaching in the week when the current US administration imposed the extraordinary tariffs that have enormous consequences And we spent a long time talking about that, using the diagrams to explain how they would work. One point about this is that teaching is all about how to address the use of AI tools, of large language models, of Chat GPT. So this is something that helps people to think logically and to be a better user of Chat GPT, to be a better user of AI. So they can't use AI to, quote, cheat, but they can use AI to help them do this better by finding the news stories and so forth, and then drawing the diagrams. And then the next kind of exercise, because these news stories are so helpful to people, because there's so many great stories, each of which we can actually draw with a diagram. It's not easy to draw. It's an exercise. It's like going, to the gym or trying to run 5 kilometers or something. It's takes effort, but afterwards, students feel really good about having done it. And the next kind of, so the types of sources of news are also extremely important to help students learn about the news sources. So many of us have become just passive users of the news on our phone. We just get the news that comes to us. We sign up for certain things, and then we're just getting Apple News or we're just getting Google News. And we are very much trying to help people be intentional about finding news that will help them be much more informed, to escape the algorithm, to go outside of what the companies are trying to tell you is going on, and instead yourself look and find what's going on in the food system. Here's just a few examples, but if you are in Nigeria, if you are in Ethiopia, if you are in any country, you will want to find the local news sources that people can and help students to understand those and not simply be reliant on the news that's fed to them on the phone. So then the um, next set of exercises is what we call data analysis, data visualization, not statistics, not regression and hypothesis testing, but simply visualization, just making a chart that makes sense. This turns out to be very difficult. It turns out to be something that's extremely time consuming for a lot of students, but after they do it, students are very proud of having been able to create their own new way of seeing the world. So here's an example where a student would obtain data from one of the data sources that we provide, that I'll share in just a minute, and on their own computer, decide what's on the axes, how is the diagram going to look? And the next slide gives us a sense of the data sources. Often we use the FAO's FAO stat, but as you can see here, there's many other sources. On the top right, GIFNA is the WHO's source of data on food and nutrition actions of governments, UN World Population Prospects, and so forth. These are all indicated in the textbook and also in the course materials that we have on the course support website. So then, what's in the book itself? The book is divided into 12 chapters because there's 12 weeks in a typical semester. So I actually teach all 12 weeks of material, but only a fraction of what's in the book. Other people would teach only 6 of the chapters or even 4 in one semester and just go in greater depth. We'll share a little bit about that um, uh, shortly. But the basic idea is, in the first half of the book, these analytical diagrams to explain and predict in qualitative terms, no numbers, just a theory. Then data visualizations, which is all about the numbers. So people can put the theory together with the data, and you can do that picking and choosing whichever topics you think are most important for your course in your setting. So in the top left of the whole, the pie diagram, you see that our theory, our analytical methods, our analytical diagrams use just basic geometry, the simplest kind of algebra, so that anyone, if they're willing to think about it enough, can draw these just like you could draw a chemical pathway in biochemistry to represent the causal mechanism behind some of the things that we see. There's a lot of definitions and concepts that use this basic algebra just to account for things, just to make sure things add up, just to ensure that we haven't forgotten something. This is extremely important, this critical thinking about a topic in a way that with sustained effort, remember, it's like running 5 kilometers. It's not easy, but after you've done it, you're proud of having done it, and it helps you to run the next time and the next time. On the top right, we've got the putting this together with data. So these charts of data, remember, it's not statistics. It's not econometrics. It's not a regression or a hypothesis test. It's just, can you see the data? Can you talk about the data in a way that reduces it to 2 dimensions, right? Just a y-axis and an x-axis. But we're asking, is this fluctuating like this? Is it trending up? Did it go up and then stabilize? And this turns out to be very hard, actually, very difficult. To accurately describe a chart of data is an effort. And then in the bottom right, we have the many puzzles that we're just trying to explain, just trying to understand why are the poorest people in the world farmers? Why are farmers usually self-employed family members living on the land, living right where they're farming? That's not the way restaurants work. Some restaurants, of course, the owner of the restaurant is just a family and they live above the restaurant. But most of the time, restaurants are owned by someone far away, but not a farm. Farms are usually so these are puzzles that we're trying to understand. So the next slide gives us a picture of what an analytical diagram looks like. So this is similar to a biochemistry type of diagram. You wouldn't expect to understand biochemistry if you haven't taken a course in it, and people would not expect to understand these diagrams if you hadn't taken a course in it. The next slide, we can just jump to the next one, shows how those individual choices add up to interact with each other to produce the outcomes we see that are not something any individual chose, but are the result of one person coming forward and saying, I want to buy or acquire this, and someone else saying, I want to provide or sell this. And when those people get together, you have the outcome we observe, the prices and the quantities that we see being traded in the market. And we do these diagrams to show how different markets are different. So we have 3 different kinds of markets. Each one is different, and we have a diagnostic explanation for why things would happen in one way in one place and a different way in a different place. So the next slide shows how we can use those diagrams to think about social problems that are not in the market. Much of economics is about markets, buying and selling and money, but much of economics is about things that are not in the market, like pollution or health and these aspects of the society that we can measure, we can take into account, but are not something people buy and sell. And here's some examples of those. And the next slide uh, tells us how we can think in greater detail about certain kinds of markets. So we're almost halfway through the course now on chapter 5, but still in the first half, and we're already thinking about what if there's only one company, a monopoly? And then on the second side, the right side of this screen, what if there's just 2 individuals or 2 companies interacting with each other? That's called game theory, not because it's a lighthearted, fun game, but because it's a gaming out of how the other person is likely to respond to you. And when you think about what the other person is going to do, you think, oh, if I do this, they'll do that. And if I do this, they'll do that. So I'll think about which choice I make based on the fact that I know the other person is a human being, not a robot. And so you can see that we're already getting into some pretty challenging, complicated aspects of human life. Um, and you can do this with the book at any level of depth that you want. You can skip the chapter entirely, or you can teach a chapter in a light way, or go into depth if you want. So the next slide uh, completes the theory section of the book with the question of social choice, of collective action, of what we do together when we form a group, such as a co-op in agriculture, a cooperative society, or there's a whole country with its government or a state or a legislature that has some kind of collective responsibility. We think about all the ways that those types of goods, these collective goods, are managed. So that completes the theory, the explanations, and then we begin to just look at data. So we start with what we think is the most important topic for most students, certainly for us, is just to understand deprivation. So this is a chart of the level of inequality in the world. And we use in these data chapters all of the data. We try to show as much data as possible in a data visualization that is surprising and interesting. So what you see in this example is that all other countries, as the dark gray dots, as the countries are richer along the horizontal axis, their level of inequality, where a higher number is more unequal, is greater. So richer countries have less inequality. Richer countries are more equal, except for these societies. Southern Africa at the top is the most unequal. Latin America in green, the next most unequal. The United States is far to the right as a very rich society and less unequal. But all of those three, Southern Africa, Latin America, and United States, are much more unequal than other countries for their level of income. And we have a simple explanation, which is that these are the settler economies, where Europeans went and colonized and then took over a lot of land and imposed slavery and had the legacy of inequality that we see in this figure. So the next slide and the rest of them proceed to show different kinds of aspects of, we come back to analytical diagrams when we look at food choice to show how the analytical diagrams from the beginning of the chapter, beginning of the book relate to actual choices. The next slide shows us how we can look at the macro economy, inflation and employment, which are phenomena not for one sector, but for the whole economy. And I want to pause on this figure just to show you how in the book, we provide links to where you can get an updated version of the same chart. Because if you're teaching, you can click on the link at the bottom of the chart and recreate a new one, but with the new data. So this is a service provided by some of the data sources that we use that's extremely, extremely helpful. This particular data comes from something called FRED, which is the Federal Reserve Economic Data, to help Americans obtain data about their own country. And in your country, you would obtain data from a national statistical organization or similar type of source. The next slide shows us how we can trace both change over time in a country and also differences among countries. A lot of our data visualizations have on the horizontal axis how rich a country is in terms of income per person, which is roughly about how much wealth there is, how much activity there is. When people exchange among each other, that's domestic product, domestic production. So the gross is the total domestic product, GDP per capita. And then on the vertical axis here, you have life expectancy, and you see how that's changed in the different countries. The US is at the far right of this, also the low end, meaning it has low life expectancy for its level of income. That has always been true for the US, and it is absolutely true now. The US has low life expectancy compared to other countries at its level of income. That has always been true for the US, as you can see in this figure. Ethiopia, on the far left, has high life expectancy for its income level, but of course, very low income level. And the next slide uh, shows an example of how we use these data visualizations to try to illustrate a story about how markets work in different contexts. And the next slide gives us the last set of questions in the book are speculations about the future based on charting the past and asking what will continue, what will change. Trends, of course, do not just continue, they change. And we look at these breakpoints in history and ask, will we have a favorable breakpoint in history, or perhaps things might get worse in many cases. And we look at how that has played out in different contexts. So we have a book that covers a lot of different things. And the next slide gives us a sense of how you could carve out the book in the next slide to think about if you were just teaching like introductory economics, you would just use chapters 1 through 6, just the theory. But the next slide suggests, well, if you're teaching agribusiness students who are going to try to earn in agricultural businesses, you might do these chapters. And the next slide gives another example. If you are interested in ag science and policy, choose those slides, those chapters. So we hope that you can, and the next slide I think ends, oh, public health topics would be, as you see here in blue. So then the next slide, oh, even one more. If you wanted to have a course that really just focused on data, data science, you could use the book as part of that and just use the chapters that really focus on how to interpret data. The next slide lists a set of possible course topics you might have, and we hope that you can recognize that, and we can talk about that in the next poll. And the next slide concludes this, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. If you guys have questions as we keep going, please pop them in the chat. But now it's time for the workshopping portion. Okay, so just to start warming up here with our final discussion, how did things go over in the backward course design room?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenging thing to try to imagine what you want as the outcome, and to plan backwards from that to do the course design exercise. It's, I've been teaching for 30 years and I'm still learning. So
yeah, same for me. We talked about course descriptions, which are really tricky to do because you want to maybe attract students to your class, but you also want to keep it focused enough on the material that you're going to be doing. And you need to keep it broad enough for other instructors to possibly hop in. And then same for learning objectives. And we use several Bloom's verbs, Will, for each learning objective of the book, which technically we shouldn't really do. And I was talking to them about that, but it doesn't matter. Like we're being broad here. So yeah, those documents that we were looking at are going to be available to you guys on Google Drive, and you can use them how you see fit. I also showed my group some of the other materials like the Teaching Food Economics website, and we looked at the book a little bit as well online too. So let's just kind of wrap up by having a discussion about some of our teaching challenges. What kinds of resources are needed? What kinds of resources do you guys want to be able to teach, either teach economics or bring some economic thinking into your current teaching, whatever it might be in the agriculture, nutrition, and health space? So does anyone have any comments about that to discuss? So maybe, yeah, so I wonder if we can just wrap up by talking about um, some of the ways that food economics has really like made a difference. Are there Are there any examples that you guys have in your minds about like what economic thinking can do in terms of policy and like making good policies? That's another question I think is pretty important. Or Will, if you had to pick one, if you had to pick one thing, sorry to put you on the spot, what would it be? Like, I'm really curious. I don't think I've ever asked you this before.
So one observation that a famous economist, Joseph Stiglitz, said when he had been the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors in the United States, and he was asked to reflect on his government service trying to use economics to inform policy. And he was asked this question, like, how did economics help govern? And he said, oh, economics helps for all the bad policies you don't see. Economics is helpful by taking people who don't know economics and saying, oh, if you do this, this thing you don't expect is going to happen. And so you don't want to do that thing, right? So it's arguing against bad policies, and that successful economists in politics often are and policy making are often most helpful when the uh, things that would otherwise have happened don't happen. So when the bad ideas that would have been that you might think are true do not become policy. So that's one observation of how economics is helpful by debunking, right? Or showing that certain ideas you would think are a good idea are not true. And of course, then when economists are not in the room, then you see people doing those bad things. So the classic example that we have right now in the United States is a government with essentially no economists in it. They are think that all of expertise is bad, and we can see that naturally on vaccine policy or something like that, where all of the health experts know vaccines are helpful. An ordinary person might think, no, I don't need them, and so we have anti-vaccination policies in the government right now because of the lack of expertise on health. But we have the same thing in economics. So they're playing out, very bad economics, and we're observing the consequences of that in the economy. So one important point is a lot of education consists of limiting impulses, holding people back from doing something that seems like a good idea, but if you think about it long enough, you learn it isn't. And so a lot of economics impact is preventing those impulsive bad things from happening. But another question is, when does economics help you to actually do a positive thing? Um, and one, I don't know, a very good example is the question of um, recognizing that because people can't see, taste, or smell the nutritional quality of food, people will be misled and they won't know. They will misunderstand and be misled about the healthiness of food. You'll have ideas that this is healthy for me, but it's not actually correct. And so this tells us that unless there is government regulation, rules about what can be sold and the labeling of foods, people would not normally, in the course of their ordinary life, choose healthier foods because they simply cannot know or are misled about healthiness. So this gives us an economics explanation for why we need regulation of the content of food and the labeling of food more than we would need if people could just tell what they like. Okay, so for clothing, for example, it's helpful to have some labeling, but I don't need a lot of labeling. I can tell what I like. But with food, I cannot tell what will be good for me because I cannot see, taste, or smell. I may be vitamin A deficient or zinc or iron deficient, but I don't doesn't make me want to eat those foods. So I don't naturally, as I get richer, want to eat healthier diets. And that's why we need. So this is an example of economics telling us that we need regulation and labeling of foods because of this fact about food choice, which is different from other kinds of choices.
Mm, yeah.
And Andrea writes about um, using economics for persuasion is also sometimes very valuable.
Yeah, that's been effective too when it comes to food fortification and enrichment because it's so low cost, such a big bang for your buck. And that I think a lot of folks think about economics like that, like, oh, it's the cost of things and measuring the cost of things. Well, for us nutrition kind of minded folks here, food fortification and enrichment is affordable for governments, and it can have a huge impact on nutritional status through that widespread, everyone gets it. Everyone gets more folic acid, everyone gets more iron, whatever it is. Yeah, great one, Andrea. So I do want to encourage all of you to please email if you have questions about teaching food economics, if you have questions about any of the materials. We are going to share all of them on the website, and you have the links as well. To do that, you can sign up for the e-list and subscribe for updates. I was telling the group, the course descriptions group, that we're going to have slides, exams, quiz questions, discussion questions that go with each chapter of the book that folks can access and use as they see fit. And that we might have a password on that we would give out to you when you sign up, just to avoid, students everywhere just kind of getting all those test questions, first, which we don't want. Graduate students and instructors and faculty, yes. So I'm just going to put a link here. This is the post-workshop survey. And please do take it. I'm really curious what you thought, and hopefully it can be useful to you. Thank you so much to the ANH Academy for hosting this for us, and for, of course, funding the open access textbook. So yeah, we really appreciate you guys being here. Please contact us if you have questions. I love talking about teaching, and definitely like figuring stuff out too. It's not, I've been teaching for 10 years now, and it's definitely not something that is just done in my mind as something I just know how to do. It's definitely always evolving and always changing. So I'm always interested to talk about it with anyone. So yes, thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us.
Thank you.